thank you all for checking out this week's episode. Once again, I'm John. If you like what you heard and saw today, subscribe to our YouTube channel, find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and check out our brand new merch store with hats, coffee mugs, t-shirts, other cool stuff coming down the pipeline. Again, thank you all for support. Be safe, and see you next week. How's it going, everyone? John here, the host of Spear Talk, and today we get to welcome Amy Bream to the show. Amy is a Nike adaptive athlete, which means she competes a hell of a lot in the CrossFit Games, and she was also born with PFFD, meaning the majority of her right leg is missing. And before I even go any further, I want to say that of all the people I get requests for guests and stuff, your name has come across from men and women, and all said this very similar stuff. Your motivation, your dedication to what you do, and your overall positive outlook on life is what people have just really told me about you. And it's kind of doing a deep dive on you the last week and a half. I'm blown away, and it's an honor to have you on here today, Amy.
Thank you so much for having me. That means a lot to hear.
And I kind of want to start with, before we jump into like the PFFD and the CrossFit and the type of physical activity you do, with the last couple of years, with the gym shutdowns and the health and fitness and such everyone with eyes on that, was this something where when it first happened, and I'm referring to like the shutdown, where your life was kind of like, well, now what am I going to do? Because now it's like I'm trying to have a positive outlook on everything, and now I can't leave the house because I can't work out anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I'm very new to CrossFit. So I didn't start CrossFit till 2021. So ironically, the shutdown is kind of what made me get started, in an odd way, because I work at a boxing gym. I'm the operations director there, and we have 3 locations. So obviously when everything happened, you know, panic set in, like so many people. And so I remember just telling people, like, well, we can't shut down. We literally can't do that. And of course, everyone was saying that. And then we had to and figure out life. And so at that point, of course, I was boxing and taking group classes, and I relied on like other people and like girls to work out with, whatever. And I had only lifted like a few handful of times here and there. And then when things started, like our gym was still mandatory shutdown, but employees could go in to try to like set up the gym for like Zoom and online workouts, all of those things. I would go in with my boss, with my 2 bosses who are both males, and we like that. Those are the only people that I ever saw or worked out with. And what it did was we would lift, because I said, I need to work out. What do I do? And they're like, well, you can work out with us, but you can't complain, and you just do everything that we say. I was like, okay, because they had like they like protected their workout space. So I was like, okay. And it was the first time that I started lifting. Like I didn't really know what I was doing at all. But it was the first time that I didn't have another girl to compare myself to, of like what, like kind of looking around, like what weight should I be doing? They would just put weight on a bar and be like, do this. And so for me, it was the best thing, because I was like, okay. And so I was getting stronger, but not really realizing it. And then by the time months later, when we were open and then we were working out with other people, if someone would comment, be like, what are you lifting, or what are you doing? And I was like, well, I don't know. Is this a lot for a girl? Because I don't even know. It was like it completely took the comparison mindset out, which again for me was the best thing, because that had been holding me back. And then I did that with them. It was just like working out kind of on a timer, a little conditioning with the strength. And then a year later is when I was introduced to it, and that's when I started in 2021.
It's interesting when you say you would try to compare yourself to other females, where in a normal situation, it's not a normal situation. You have one leg, and it's like the irony of that, where who even cares about that? It's like, what do I do compared to another girl? And it's super fascinating that you're able to kind of break that mold and just like look at it from we're both females, or I'm a male and you're a female type thing, where it's like you almost have to be that way, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I definitely used to think more so of like about my leg. And then that's something that I've worked really hard in my mindset, not perfect with it, but of just like, if I don't want my leg to be a big deal, then I need to make it not a big deal. So, it's like if I go into a gym and like, there was for a long time that I was very self-conscious just in life, let alone in gym settings. Like to have my legs show in a gym was not something I did ever. Um, but when someone very close to me kind of called me out on it one time, and he's like, "Hey, if someone's acting weird about your leg, it's because you're giving them a weird vibe. Like most humans aren't like tiptoeing around like, is she okay? Because if you're acting like you're okay, they're gonna respond to that." So he's like, if you feel like people are treating you a certain way, it's because you're subconsciously asking them to. So change that. And it like completely changed everything about how I went about it.
On your website, you blog. Some of your blogs are amazing because very the humility and the level of like it's just everything you talk about, and you actually do kind of talk about when it comes to like relationships, or like the
Mhm.
perception of people. That oh, she's really pretty, she's an athlete, oh, she's got one leg, or it's like how you deal with that type of ups and downs of your personal life like that, and for you to kind of put that out there, I can see why men and women look at that type of self like you put yourself on you have like the self-worth of yourself where it's like, hey, like I'm just putting myself out there, I'm not perfect, this is what you're gonna get, and don't judge me on this type of stuff. I just thought that was super powerful, and I get why people resonate with you, look up to you as a role model.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think vulnerability is like a very scary, obviously, and especially like the internet's a whole different ball game. But when I started sharing everything, it was kind of like I've had this like unspoken rule where the internet is not where I process. It's
Right.
like very, very close inner circle of people that I trust with my life, that I like allow to hold me accountable and share like my most vulnerable parts. And then when I share something, it's not that I've perfected it by any means, because it's always a process, but it's like I know that I've landed in a place that I can put this out there, and no matter what someone comments, because a lot of times I purposely don't read comments, just because I don't want that to be the reasoning for why I post. But whatever someone comments, it's not affecting why or what I posted, because that's not why I did it, because I've already
Right.
processed myself. So that's helped me be more open and vulnerable than maybe some people are used to seeing on the internet.
Well, I think the way the internet and the social media, it's everything. It seems like the best parts of social media, where it's like the positive stuff, whether it's the quotes or the motivational videos or the family stuff or the just a good hearty laugh, right? And I find that even in good when good something good is posted, like the Mr. Beast thing this past week, he was basically cured or put the money for curing 1,000 people from blindness. Well, half the people were like, "Well, why?" They made a negative connotation of it. Here's a guy that's giving his time and resources to help others, and if someone looks at one of your videos like, oh, wonder what she could do if she had two legs, it's like these negative things where it's like
Yeah.
I'm grateful for people like you to put your stuff out there, because it's a gentle reminder to myself that not all days are gonna be perfect, not all people are gonna be perfect, but just be true to yourself. And I think that's like the one cool thing about social media, because your pages and stuff, it's all inspirational, it's funny, it's self-deprecating, and I think the humility behind you
Mhm.
is what sets you apart from a lot of people, a lot of athletes.
Thank you. Thank you. Not perfect, but trying.
Yeah, and so to kind of go back, I know you've talked about your parents and family being so receptive of you, being not knowing when you were born you're gonna have PFFD. But when you were growing as a kid, when did you realize that you are different, but you still want to do stuff that everyone else does, whether it's the recess at school, sports at school, whatever? Like, at what point in your life were you kind of like you had kind of passed that hump where you're kind of like, I can just do what anyone else does?
Yeah. I definitely, I mean, I guess I was always aware that I had a prosthesis and all of that, but I attribute a lot of that to how my parents handled it. One, I was pretty stubborn as a kid, so I didn't, and this probably it didn't help me, but I didn't want to do like physical therapy or like support groups or anything like that because I wanted to blend in. And that definitely didn't help in certain ways. And I've come to realize that as an adult, like, and I've now stepped into that. But my parents tried to get me to do that. I was just really stubborn. They did do well. I mean, my mom never let me like never let other people define what I wanted to do. So she says, like I remember second grade, it was time to swim, and it wasn't a matter of well, Amy, like I already knew how to swim. So they're like, well, Amy, of course she's going to do it with her classmates, but they're in second grade. They're all going to freak out. So she asked the school to let her come in and like share with the class like one of my older legs and explain to them like your friend is about to take this off and it's going to be like you're going to want to stare and that's okay, but she's still your friend, so like let's not act like a person. And she tells me this, I was too young to remember, but the school at one point gave her a pamphlet to fill out of like activities that I could and could not do, for recess and gym and all of that. Obviously, they're trying to protect themselves from getting sued or anything. And
Right.
my mom handed it back and she made them mad. She's like, I'm not doing this. She's like, she's going to tell you what her limits are. And I'm not putting on a paper what my daughter can do. And so like that mindset is like, I don't even know if she realized how significant those things were at the time, but it was just, yeah, just let her do it. And it's helpful that I'm, one of four siblings. I'm the youngest. And so they also have helped me like in times where my mom wasn't as strong and wanted to like maybe coddle me, like, or if she was tempted to, my siblings could step in, and my dad as well. Like he helped me swim and everything. But, they definitely came in with the, no, mom, she's fine. Like, let her do it. And so I just had that all growing up. And then of course, middle school hits and high school and all of
Oh
the
yeah.
usual deal with. And I really wasn't publicly bullied or anything. If people said comments, they never said it really maliciously to me. It was more like maybe they said something off color, but they didn't realize that it was. So like I was really blessed with that. Like I didn't have like hardcore bullying or anything. But I just started to go into more of my shell of my comfort zone. So I started to hate gym class and sports, and I never touched any of that because I assumed I couldn't do it well. And I'm very much someone that like, if I want to do it, I want to do it well. So I
Right.
had life and focused on music and all of those things, but it wasn't until after I moved to Nashville that I was like, let me try to do something like kind of physical, see how it goes. So
It's I think there is something to the fact that people were able to still make jokes with you. I mean, obviously you don't want
Mhm.
people, you don't want to be part of the joke. You want to be part of the joke, not the joke. And
Yeah.
it almost maybe like a mental relief, maybe, where it's kind of like, hey, at least they're treating me like Joe Schmo next door or my other friend. Like they're saying the same stuff, and it's like I'm just their friend. I think there is something to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And my friends would always say growing up, like we'd make jokes and like we'd have fun with it. There's so many things that we did because you don't meet many people with one leg, so you got to use it when you got it. But they like a lot of times they'd be like, "Oh, sorry, like I always forget you have one leg," and like those things would always make me feel great. It's like, okay, I'm doing something right. Like if my friends aren't constantly thinking, "Well, can we do this activity because Amy has one leg?" Like that's what I want.
Right.
So yeah, just being a part of a group, and part of that is like in a loving way making fun of your friends. So yeah, let's do that. Like I welcome.
For those that aren't aware, could you kind of talk about what PFFD actually really is? Like, it has the trends changed? Like, where are the statistics when you were born to today? Like, kind of to give us the big picture of this.
So I don't know of any like trends statistically. The statistic that's always, has been kind of has been true in my experience, in about one, it happens to about one in every 200,000 kids. So it stands for proximal femoral focal deficiency, but essentially it means you're missing some extent of your femur bone. And it goes up to your hip, so it really depends. I've met several people with PFFD since like sharing my story, and it's interesting because of course we can relate a lot, but we all have different stories. A lot of times, if you have PFFD, you're born with, well, all the time, you're born with what would have been your leg. So, but the extent is very different. So, like, someone might have like part of a foot or whatever. And so, a lot of times, there's that part is actually amputated and they still have an amputation. I never had an amputation. My limb is extremely short. My right hip isn't like fully developed, or like there's a lot of muscular atrophy because of what's missing. Um, on that side, it's getting better, but so that for me, like I never had an amputation because it was so short. And at the time when I was younger and where I was at, it was pretty experimental surgery. And so we decided to not do that, which also lends to like how I attach my leg, because you can suction it on, or you can like literally, it's called vacuum, and like pull air out of it. Like there's so many different ways to attach a leg, and that literally is different for every person. So regardless, you might meet someone with PFFD, but every adaptation is like their thumbprint. It's not going to be the same for anyone. So you can instantly get on this level of like, we relate to here, but then what is also like, what can we learn from each other? Because there's definitely things that are still going to be different for sure.
And so how was you kind of answered it, but like the technology of the leg, how has that changed over the years? Like, because I know you've posted videos where like you're screwing something in. I mean, obviously they're always looking to make something better, right? Whether it's improving the gait or the step or the walking or the pressure.
Yeah.
And I'm blown away by how you see all these cases and stuff where people make these robotic arms or legs where it's like you couldn't even tell if this person's wearing pants, that they have a prosthetic. It's like,
Yeah.
how important is it for you to be one of those people where as you push yourself physically, like you're a prime example of what the impact your body and what the prosthesis can take from a physical standpoint for these people and scientists to work on stuff to improve people like you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, technology is, it's crazy how much of a change I've seen. You know, when you're younger, you start with much more simple mechanical knees. They're less expensive, they're very safe, but you're going to look like you're limping a lot more because they're less fluid. And that's kind of what I grew up on. Then you can move my personal progression, you go into this like hydraulic knee, which is, it's a lot more fluid, but there's less of necessarily a safety feature if you land on it wrong. This may have improved in the knees since I was at this point, but I hear often still that if you land on it wrong, you can just, it can give out. Like I would fall all the time in high school if I like landed on it when I'm like carrying books or whatever. But then there's, you know, what's considered, it doesn't fit everyone perfectly, but like a microprocessor knee is generally speaking, like the end all be all. It's the highest form of technology with it. It's computerized. So the knee actually like measures your stride and your gait and adds tension. Like you can adjust that. So it kind of like it sends messages to the foot and reads the terrain so it can adjust. So obviously it's still a lot of work, but it just is supposed to be like kind of combine the fluidity and the safety features. So it's a lot heavier, and obviously you're dealing with technology, so things can go wrong. I've used those in competitions and something's gone wrong with it, so I've had to go get it fixed. Like there's definitely, you know, drawbacks for every wonderful thing about it, but for me, the positives way outweigh the negatives. So the other thing too is there's so many companies now that are coming out with like specialty legs. So obviously there's running blades that people always see in like the commercials for the Paralympics. There's a leg that's great, that's newer. It's called BioAdapt, and it's for, I use it for heavy lifting, but it's also for snowboarding and water sports.
Wow.
The person who came out with it is actually was an amputee himself, and he was frustrated because he was super active, had his leg amputated, and he was frustrated with the lack of like legs specifically made for not just like walking and like more, you know, if you have a less active lifestyle, but he's like, I want to do these extreme sports and I can't do it with the legs that are available. So he made his own. So like one thing that's been, I've wanted to share, and like I hope that I've done it well in the last few years, is like I'm not like this special person that's like rolling in money and just like dishing out thousands of dollars for like
Right.
legs. Because specialty legs aren't covered by insurance. Insurance is awful when it comes to prosthetics. If there's one thing that I could be like, this needs to change in this country, it's that. Because if you're not coming from the VA, you have to spend a sickening amount of money to get a leg. And so that, like, I've just had to get creative. And where I used to be like, well, I can't do that because of money. It's like, well, no, there are grants and there are sponsorships and there are things that people want to help. They're like wonderful organizations that they want to help amputees get more active. So let's stop shutting down. Let's find those things. And, you know, sometimes amputees can get frustrated because they're like, well, I applied for those and I was rejected. It's like, okay, well, that's because that you're not active enough right now. And if they're going to spend that amount of money, you need to prove that you're use it. So like, if you really want to do it, prove to them that you're going to use it. And so that's kind of like, it's on both sides. Like no side is like the victim or the bad guy. It's just like, hey, you want to do it, you go through these steps, you can get it then, and you can do these amazing things and live a life you never thought was possible, but you got to do it.
It's interesting how you just kind of talked about when you have a malfunction per se in your competition or
Mhm.
something. It's almost like when if you sprain an ankle with a regular leg or your other leg, or it's fascinating to me that so when it comes to like training,
Mhm.
do you have to overcompensate on your other opposite side with the normal leg to make up for the fact that the left leg is at a different level? Like how do you know when you've trained enough before a competition for that competition? Like how do you like what's your reaction to your prosthetic leg in turn versus your other leg when you know you've done a workout? Like how do you kind of like wrap your head around like maybe you didn't push yourself far enough or you did push yourself far enough, but it's how's that work?
It's definitely tricky. I would say that's the most frustrating part about competing. I think I can do still a better job about like problem solving for the worst situations rather than like that's something going into this year competing that I want to do better than rather than just kind of waiting for it to happen and having to react because you do have to adapt like in the moment more so than if you didn't have that adaptation for sure. So like for me, my biggest thing is my limb is so short and suction breaks when I start to sweat. So when I was at the CrossFit Games this past year, there's a lot of running programmed, which makes me sweat more than any activity. So like I went up, there are a couple different workouts that I would like run and then go up a rope climb and the leg fell off during the rope climb because it was so slippery. So like I lost time because I had to put it back on. So in
Also,
that,
if there's a malfunction like that, since it's part of you and it's something say it falls off, you have that sets you back.
yeah,
Oh
yeah, no,
wow.
judges aren't allowed to like grab the leg for you. It's just kind of like you got to figure it out. Like there's
Wow.
leg flew off, and then we had to run across the field, but it was timed and it was going to take too long to actually put the leg back on, so I just hopped across the field. So it definitely like obviously I didn't win that event because other people were running. So those things are definitely the most frustrating part about competing. But I think I can get better, and it's just a matter of me going into it one like problem solving a little bit better. Like how can we make sure that this doesn't happen as much as possible. But if slash when it does, because there is a level of like stuff's just going to happen, like how can I calm myself down well enough to handle it the best way possible? Because in the past, like I've struggled with keeping my composure because I get very frustrated in those moments. So it's just kind of like overcoming like mental things a little bit more than maybe some people have to think about, or maybe I should say in a different way.
Right.
Um, so yeah.
I am familiar with CrossFit because when I was going through the Secret Service, it was one of those things where all our trainers were starting to do all CrossFit, like the hanging, like the kipping, like the pull up kipping, like all these deadlifts, like weird stuff at the time where we're just kind of like dude, this is stupid. Like why aren't we actually doing it right? Like I'd rather play a
Yeah.
basketball or I'd rather hit the gym and do actual weights. But
Yeah.
as I got older, I realized it was actually perfect for what we do at the time in law enforcement. So I am kind of familiar with the tactics, but when it comes to like a competition per se, do you know what the events are going to be, or do you have to kind of train all around the day of the CrossFit Games? You're like, these are the 10 things you're doing.
Yeah, you train all around. There's a few competitions throughout the year that they'll release workouts like a week in advance, but obviously that's not enough to like, you know,
Right.
if you haven't trained it, you good luck. But the games are like the day of, or I mean it really like that's the thing, like kind of be ready for anything. So there are times where like especially being in the adaptive setting, like if there's like rain and they have to change it, like you can be on your way to the event and they'll be like, you're not doing that, you're doing this instead. I've had events where I've walked out on the floor and they'll have certain equipment out and you just start doing a movement and then you just stare at your judge and the judge tells you what you're going to do next, but you don't know how or how many
Oh
reps.
wow.
So that's definitely, yeah, like you literally it's just anything. So and the games definitely have always thrown, I've been there 2 years and it's always like it's a very very emotional week for me because they're always like throwing stuff at you and then I'm figuring out how to adapt it. but it's also like, I mean, I in a way like that because it helps me just carry that attitude into life. I don't get as easily shaken by other things because I'm like, well, if I can do this under pressure, then other things
Right.
are out too.
Now, how
Um,
difficult is it to maintain your mind and your body at the same level on the same kind of equal? Like, if that stuff happens, like I can see where people would be like, "Screw this!" Like, what are you
yeah.
talking about? It's like, how do you kind of when you have like a bad day mentally or physically or vice versa? What's the best way for you to kind of reset yourself where they're both operating at the same level?
I mean, I definitely have not been perfect with this. I've had a lot of times where I've like been mad or pitied myself or whatever. And I think the biggest thing is not to shove those feelings away, like feel it and then move on. Because if you're constantly like, it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. Now there is something to be said that sometimes in competitions you kind of have to do that because you have to react so much in the moment. But like even afterwards, I'll be like, okay, that sucked. That wasn't fair. Or
Right.
like all of those things. And then kind of like reset of this is how I feel. It's okay to feel that, but also like staying in this place isn't going to help anything. It's not going to change the situation. It's not going to like change how it went. And really, it's only going to hurt me to stay in this situation because it's only affecting me the most. So, like, I can wallow, but like, I can't control the situation, but I can control my attitude about it. And then it's funny you say this because I literally had someone reach out to me this morning. They messaged and said, like, hey, like, how do you mentally deal with competing with people that don't have the same adaptation as you? Because most often, if I'm being honest, like I'm an above knee amputee. My limb is short. I've actually rarely competed and never at the games or at Wodapalooza, which is another one in Miami, competed with another above the knee athlete. Um, so it's usually someone with a different kind of adaptation that maybe they're not dealing with the same things that I have. Um, and they're like, how is that? Like, how do you do that and not get angry? And obviously I do sometimes, but then it's like it's got to
Yeah.
be my why has to be more than competing because adaptive athletics just isn't at the point right now where that alone is worth it. Like there's less athletes, the competition is different, they're still figuring things out. You honestly, like, the prize money is like, I'm thankful for it, but it barely ever covers my hotel. It's like that kind of thing where it's like, if you're in adaptive athletics for the actual competition, you're gonna get mad, you're gonna get burnt out, and you're gonna quit. Like it's just not it. Like, and
Right.
I'm not to complain, but to be honest, but also going into it, I still do it because one, I've enjoyed pushing my limits to see what I can do regardless. And then I've shocked myself in beating people with different adaptations that I have because I didn't think that would be possible. So like I want to keep going, keep trying. And two, adaptive athletics is never going to grow unless people are willing to be guinea pigs. So if we like quit, then like you're part of the problem, in my opinion. Like I understand it, but you're
Yeah.
not helping it. And I wish that I had other girls my age have people like me showing them how to do it when I was my age. So it's like if I'm not willing to be that person again, then like who else? Like if I'm not willing to throw myself into it, then I don't have a place to complain because I'm not willing to make a change. So it's kind of like even if it sucks, like think of the bigger picture. It's not about like your prize money. It's about setting up the future and like a whole generation of like girls and guys to like see what they can do and like raise the standard and demand for better in the future because there's enough people that want to do it, you know?
And as you continue to push yourself in these games or doing what you do you feel like the weight as you're thrust into being a role model? Do you think the weight of that sometime can become unbearable because you are this person that's not going to give up, and there's a kid being born tomorrow that's going to be in the same situation you are that could look at you years down the road and be like, I want to follow Amy. It's like, is it? And I know like a lot of athletes. The other day I was watching this, or not even athletes, but celebrities or people that um, they had this clip of Lorde, the singer, and she was smoking a cigarette, and she was walking on stage and sang it just the whole 90 minutes of incredible. She's amazing, and all the comments were like, "Well, she's smoking. She's not a role model. Like she got to put the cigarette out." And I get where it's coming from,
Mm-hmm.
but her response was, "I wasn't put on earth to be a role model. I was put on earth to do my craft, which I'm really good at, but I'm not here to." be a parent for your or a role model for your kids or vice versa. It's like, do you feel that that's a
Mm.
fair assessment? Because I get where Charles Barkley has talked about this, about his issues, and people are like, he's like, I'm not a role model for your kids. I'm who I
Yeah.
am. Stop thrusting and putting
Mm.
people in the thing. I think you are a little bit different because someone like me or someone that might have PFFD looks at you and
Mhm.
be like, you are a role model, right? Like you're doing something that I wake up some mornings and I've got 2 healthy legs and I'm like, I gotta cut 2 acres of grass on a push mower. Like, what are you
Mhm.
talking? Like, this sucks. But
Yeah.
it's just weird. The whole idea of role model is so fascinating
Yeah.
to me because I get where they're coming from. I get where you're coming from. It's like, how do you find someone like me that's just looking for someone for that extra to kind of
Yeah.
start their day?
Yeah. No, I completely understand that because yeah, I definitely wasn't expecting any of this. Like I've grown a lot of my following. I think it's both because I've grown a lot of my following because a video from the games went viral, and then I
Yeah.
was kind of into this role that I didn't ask for or expect, but at the same time, when the opportunities kept coming, I chose to keep going. So I do think that it's a little bit of both, where it's like you get to a point where there's a lot of people who are excellent at their craft who choose not to be in the spotlight or are
Right.
not. So like it's a mix of like, yeah, like you don't have to be a role model, like maybe someone put that on you, but for you to continue to be in the spotlight and to take on the blessings that come with it, because
Right.
there's opportunity and things that I do get, you are, whether you want to be or not, people are going to see you as an example. And for me, my whole thing is like, my mantra has always been, before any of this, was like, live by example. Like if I wouldn't do it myself, why would I expect other people to do it? um and then that is also why I try to be vulnerable and honest, because it's like I don't want people thinking that I have it all together and that I'm perfect, because then I'm unrelatable, and that defeats the whole purpose of why I share.
Right.
you know I want other people to do what I've done, in some way, shape, or form, at least in their mindset. And so yeah, I do, like, for me it can feel overwhelming, but then I think, like, and I'm not saying this to be cliche, like, I don't necessarily think that there's anything extra special about me. I think that this is just something I've done and it's worked, and I've had opportunities come my way. But there are equally people that have worked just as hard, if not harder, that just didn't have that same opportunity. And so if I get that opportunity, I just want to do it well.
Right.
Um, so it's just kind of like, I don't think that I'm any more special, and I've gotten the way here because I was just me. So like it's just as I grow and fail and do well and all of those things, it's about keeping myself accountable, but also making sure that, like, I have people in my corner who will hold me accountable to be the person that I, like,
Right.
always said that I wanted to be. So yeah, I'm
One
with
of
him.
To kind of go back to CrossFit, and I want to ask you this because CrossFit is always like, it seems such a polarizing thing where traditional athletes and weightlifters, like, it's stupid or it's a cult, and then the other side of it where it's like it's amazing. Like, how would you describe CrossFit, and what makes it so intimidating to people that don't? Is it because they don't understand it? Like, because you always, like, people that are anti CrossFit say it's going to hurt your body and injuries, and it's not.
Yeah,
They're not doing it right. I mean, everyone that works in the gym or has lifted weights, they're all experts. So I think that's what kind of intimidates and infuriates people who do want to work out and find something that works for them. But these people are so-called experts, like, well, that's not how you should really lift, or that's not how you should do a pull-up. And it's like, I'm just fascinated that you look at these people that do CrossFit. I mean, you're talking about some of the healthiest, fittest people on earth.
yeah,
And it just blows my mind that people want to look at that and be like, it doesn't work for you in the long term.
yeah. Well, it's funny because I used to be one of those people, actually. Like, I'd look at pull-ups and be like, oh my God, like,
Yeah,
whatever.
right.
And I've learned, like, one, like, I know people talk about like the cult of CrossFit, and like people are,
I love it.
it's fun 'cause you're in it, you like, no one is in CrossFit like denies that. They're not like, yeah, we're not ridiculous. They're like, no, we are, but like we don't care because it's fun. And like they kind of make fun of themselves. And I will say, like, being in like going to the games the first year, I was blown away and still am by the community. Like there is no, like you do not get to the competition and no one is rooting against someone ever. Like ever. Like if anything, they are like rooting for the person in last place. They are cheering. Like if someone else wins and it's not like their team or their person that they want to win, they're like, oh, that sucks. But they're not like, forget
Boo.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just such an uplifting environment. It's like, all right, you want to call that community like cultish, whatever. It's probably one of the healthiest cults I've ever seen. You
Right.
know, like and I know that sounds exaggerated or whatever, but
Yeah.
like it's
No Kool-Aid there. Yeah.
yeah, it's just like it truly is a community and it's uplifting. Where I don't like it when people think like CrossFit's the only way. It's like, well, no, like you can do what you don't have to be a CrossFit athlete. It's not like the best way. As far as like people shouldn't train that way or whatever, obviously there's always good and bad examples in every field. So like you have coaches that shouldn't maybe be coaches or not, you know,
Right.
like you are always going to see a bad example along with the good, but you just have to like have discernment of who to actually learn from. And for me, it was learning like what I love about CrossFit is like the mental strategy and pacing behind it. It's not just like you just sprint and you just go and kill yourself. No, you're actually like incredibly logical about it. And everything is finding the way to be the most efficient in every possible movement. So, like gymnastics, they take like, you know, people always like the pull ups. It's the biggest thing. They're like,
Yeah,
they're
of
on
course.
their pull ups. Honey, I can tell you that, like, to those people, like, you CrossFitters can outstrict pull up you. I promise. Like that's what I always want to tell those people. Like, but it's not about they're doing that because it's a cross. It is CrossFit. It's taking a strict functional movement, combining it with gymnastics so they can be as efficient as possible with those muscles to be able to do something immediately after. Because otherwise your body has a limit. You're just going to go to fatigue and you won't finish.
Right.
So it's like learning those kinds of things where it's like, no, they're not cheating. They're being efficient crossing like paths of something to be able to like do something that's really really freaking hard that wouldn't be possible if they weren't doing it in an efficient way. So like that's what I love about it and have come to learn about the sport, and like that's what keeps me in it for sure.
When you're actively competing, like, is there seasons or like if there's an off season, and how does that directly relate to like your eating like healthy living type thing? Like, is it all connected, or are you that type of person that has to have your square meals, like meal preps? Like, how does that work for you?
It's definitely an investment for sure, as far as like time and energy, because that's one of the first things I picked up. I started CrossFit literally a weekend. I was like, well, I have to focus on recovery because I'm dying. Um, like, and so I've started even going into the second games. I met with a nutrition coach a few months before because I've always had a pretty healthy understanding of food, and you know, like I've always had proteins, carbs, veggies, like all of that. My mom like put in a really good standard of nutrition in us. But for me, it was like I see food as fuel, but I want to enjoy it. So I don't want to eat the same thing that I hate every day, but
Yeah.
that requires like planning. So it's just like understanding that like you can be creative with the food, but yeah, it's probably going to be more expensive if you want to like buy meals or meal prep it yourself. But I eat more now than I ever have. And like understanding that when I went to the nutritionist, he was like, "Oh, you're not eating enough." Like you're, and I was eating like 3 meals a day. You know, I was eating food, like plenty of food, what I thought, but he was like, this is how much you're training. Food is fuel. You need more fuel to get to reach your goals. So it's definitely like going into a season. But then like after the games I went to see him and I was like, I am exhausted after, especially after any competition like the games, you just kind of go into like this like uh almost like a hangover.
Yeah.
It's like you're so tired, like because you've dedicated so much of your physical, emotional, and mental energy into this for months leading up to it, and then it's done. You're like, well, what do I do now? And then I went to the nutrition coach, and he's like, all right, he's like, I don't want you to track anything. I want you to eat what you want to eat. I want like you know what's going to make your body feel good, but like take a break. And he kind of goes into like survivor mode where it's like this is loosely what you can do, but don't track it. Like and it just being I appreciate that. And I also told him what I needed. So he responded that way. But it's just this of like life's a balance. And you do have to be much more mindful of it when you're actually training versus than just like working out. But with anything, I think you get out what you put in. So if you want to be like the absolute best at what you need to do, then you need to be a little bit more particular with those things. And it's not a matter of restriction. It's a matter of like, this is what you got to do to do what you say you want to.
I love that the definition of what an athlete is now bigger than the four major sport or five with soccer, right? And it's like
Yeah.
it's cool to see Under Armour or Nike or Gatorade endorse people or that are athletes, whether you are a kayaker, a CrossFitter, whatever you do. It's like the definition of athletes change over the years. And how cool is it for you to be someone that now you're part of the new true definition of what an athlete really is?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was one of my hardest struggles, honestly, starting to like call myself an athlete, because I grew up telling people I was one of the least athletic people they'd ever meet.
Right.
So like even, I mean, I was a sponsored Nike athlete and I still struggled with it. I mean, I still am. I'm going into my second year, but the first few months of like when people would ask, I struggled with telling people that I was sponsored by Nike to be an athlete. And so that just goes to show how much of a mental game it is more than anything. Because at that point, I was, over a year into CrossFit, I was doing pretty well and had won competitions. And yeah, it's definitely been like a confidence mental building journey more than anything.
Does Nike not, I would say tell you? Do they tell you to, hey, you gotta do this number of competitions this year, or are they, hey, do what you do, you're our athlete, just promote us? Like what's that entail for you as a Nike athlete?
Yeah. There are general guidelines. Like I have to compete to go to the CrossFit Games. Like that's obviously it's the biggest
Right.
it. So if I wouldn't want to, like, why am I doing it? Um, and then I have to compete so often. But they let me choose which competitions. But with them, I've been able to do other like appearances at some CrossFit competitions, but also even like they're trying to have more adaptation shown like on their NTC app, their training app. So one of the first things I did with them was go out and film some of their training classes. And so there was a like trainer and we were doing it that are like the workouts are now on the app, but I was just doing my adapted version, which I think is really cool. And I hope continues to be a thing. Cause again, it's all about like, you know, people don't know if they don't see it. And so like creating an awareness in the community among non-adaptive people, but also showing adaptive people, hey, like you can do this. So like, this is how to do it.
Do you think there'll be a push to make it even more mainstream? Because like when I watch, I've never done like a Tough Mudder, like a Spartan race. I've always wanted to do it. It's just my schedule with work has always been like just too hectic, right? But with events like that, or even CrossFit, or some of this crazy stuff that these men and women like yourself are doing, at what point does the Olympics or like the World Cup type stuff, or like the even bigger organization, be like, hey, this is a mainstream thing here? Like, how insane would it be to see a CrossFit Games where a team of five from every country going against? I mean, it would just be pure
Yeah.
insanity, and I think there's something to that. But like, what's it take to get to that next level?
I think it's a lot more of what we do now. I think it's continuing like because it like to host adaptive athletics is so expensive and so hard because there's only so many adaptive athletes. Like you have to show it to have other athletes get involved.
Right.
And then there's so like I said, every adaptation is like a thumbprint. So you add in other divisions and everyone is different and people want to feel like their adaptation is more or less or like they have a right to demand XYZ. Like there's a lot of it's messy, like anything. And so I think just being willing to do it in the messy is what we need. Because now it's really exciting. Like even one of the semifinal events just that's like a qualifier to get to the games. It's always been non-adaptive people, but they just announced like 2 days ago that they're going to host an adaptive division, and just like showcasing it. And I think the more that we do that, and not keeping it so separated, like these are adaptive competitions, these are non-adaptive competitions, but like having it be at the same space and giving them the chance to like showcase what they can do is what we need. Because if people don't see it and it's not in front of them, like if you've never grown up with someone with an amputation, you're not going to be like, let me Google or like turn on the TV and flip through the channels until I watch an amputee doing something,
Right.
like be constantly put in front of them. And then the more that that happens, I think it's like, this is really cool. I want to see more of this. Then there's going to be more willingness to spend a budget on like investing in that and increasing opportunity for adaptive athletes to compete. So it's going to be messy for a while, but I think that's hopefully, I mean, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing.
No, for sure. And it's interesting because you look at like UFC just bought, I think, Power Slap, where men and women
Mhm.
now slap each other. And I don't I mean you watch the TikTok videos, like the reels, and you're just kind of like, man, this is pure insanity. But I get why people watch it because it's barbaric and people love blood and all that
Yeah.
stuff. But it's like if there's room for that at the table, there's room for adaptive like
Yeah.
athletics, right? And it's just like it's just maybe it's because it's people aren't. I don't know. It's maybe it seems like there's more of a human aspect behind adaptive athletics versus two Vikings slapping each other, which I get it. I love it too, but
Yeah.
where's the stories of Amy's and other athletes where it's like this is 30 for 30 written all over it. And it's all unintentional stuff because they're just pure good people.
Yeah.
They're humans. They're role models for people that are looking for someone to be a role model.
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, like going to competitions and hearing people's stories has been like so incredible because there's been a lot of times where I've gone and wanted to pity myself and then saw someone else overcoming a different or like arguably a way harder adaptation. And watching them push through it has literally brought me to tears. And like that's when I realized I'm like, oh, this is what people mean if they like say whatever to me. It's like it is actually inspiring and motivating to be like just like shut up and work harder. And I think hearing everyone's story because everyone is different, it's like oh my gosh, like even the competition I was just at in Miami, there was a guy and he was in his 60s. He was a master's athlete but in the adaptive divisions. He was in the neuro division, and you kind of like look at him and you're like, okay, like this guy's doing it this thing, whatever, but like he's maybe not going to be like the most physically best athlete here. But then I learned his story, and he was a vein surgeon in Florida, I believe, and like one of the top like he was the best at the type of surgery that he did in like this whole surrounding area. And then he got Parkinson's, and
Wow.
world fell, you know, obviously, and
Yeah.
like don't it changes like your life expectancy, everything. And he's had Parkinson's for over 20 years because he started CrossFit and like you know and was active before and then found CrossFit and like kept going, and now he keeps competing in it. And it's just like those things where you're like at first you want to be like, oh, like this is a nice like older gentleman getting after it, and then you
Right.
like he's overcome and been like, oh, I'm gonna shut up because he's more mentally tough than I probably ever thought I could be, you know, like those moments are so important for people to see.
It's
So
yeah, it's crazy. Sometimes when people like to bitch or complain about it, it's like, oh, it's too cold out, or it's raining out, or my back hurts. Oh, cool, all stuff. Is not saying you can't have those feelings, but that
yeah,
kid in Dana Farmer that's going through
yeah,
cancer treatments right now is and with this biggest smile on his face. You couldn't even pry it off his face, and he's not complaining. It's like it just kind of when I see videos of I see other people that clearly have an issue whether it's health or mental, and they're competing and doing what they love, and it's like I have no right to have those thoughts in my head. Or could I look at it and be like, you know what, just because I don't want to have those thoughts, it's okay to have a bad day too, right? Like
mhm,
it's that weird to find that
yeah,
equilibrium between having it's okay for me to have a bad day versus I need to stop bitching because my bad day is that person's uh best
yeah.
day. So how do you put where do you find yourself in the middle of that?
Yeah, that's a great question because I don't like when people are like, well, I don't have anything to complain, so I'm gonna shut up. Because there is it's this like awareness. It's just of it's like I said earlier, like you're allowed to feel what you feel, like it's real. So you can pity yourself, like you can feel like all of the emotions about why you know are down or whatever, but it's choosing what you do with that to stay in it or to move on. That's where it's like I never want to make someone feel bad for not wanting to squat because they're next to me, you know? But like
Right.
it for me, it's all about are you pushing what you're capable of, whatever that is. If you're feeling weak or whatever, and like just showing up and being there is actually what you're capable of, then great. Celebrate that you're there. Like, you don't have to feel bad if I'm like beating the crap out of you in this workout. That's fine. But if you're showing up and you're taking what the movement that you have for granted, and you are not doing that because you're straight up feeling lazy and don't want to, that is a slap in the face. And I've said that to people before. I remember coming back from a competition and probably got a little too heated. I came back from adaptive only competition I've ever experienced, and I literally saw people have seizures, get up and finish the workout. And it was a very emotional weekend to watch that. And I came back to teach the first boxing class at my gym the next day. And I remember like, it was a great class. Like they weren't doing anything wrong, but I like said burpees and like half the class like left to go take a drink of water. And John, I turned the music down and I said, y'all, I just watched people who would give anything in the world to have the movement that you have right now, and they had seizures and finished a harder workout than this right now. So if you don't get your butt back here and do these burpees, that is a slap in the face, and I better see them. And I was not pleased. I was like, you need to be aware of the movement that you have right now and what you're taking for granted. Go do this. And so there are moments where I'm like, are you aware of what you have? That you can't live constantly in that state, because I'm also not walking around every day being like, I have 2 arms, thank you, it's just like human nature. But sometimes you're like, okay, I'm not doing something to my capacity, so like, let's reset and try that again.
Right. Well, I think it's important too to have those. You can have those bad days as long as you own up to it, but you still have to you still have to finish the day, right? Like you just can't. Yeah. I think it's so easy, maybe because it is easy, just lay in bed all day. It would just be like, and I have friends that struggle with depression and mental health, and it's like when they have their bad days, I wish I could do more for them, and they try their best. It is sad when people say that, and when you look at these people, you're like, man, I kind of get it. Like I don't have those bad days. Maybe it's ignorant of me not to understand mental health or depression. And I'm just like, oh, just get out of bed, make your bed, brush your teeth, and start your day. Like, how hard is it? And if they can't do that, it's like I have to be better understanding of what they're going through as well. And I think that everyone has to work together, just kind of figure out like what works, and we all like kind of go ahead together.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree.
So this has been awesome, and I can talk for hours. But if people want to kind of follow you, what social media handles, go to your website, what competitions do you have coming up? Like, how can people continue to follow and watch your journey?
Yeah. I am on both Instagram and TikTok as One Leg to Stand On, and you just write out the word one. A little bit of a joke there, but you gotta love it. So at One Leg to Stand On Instagram and TikTok, and then my website, you can go to amybream.com, or if you go to onelegtostandon.com, if that's how you know me, it will direct to the same place. So you can kind of, follow me on there. I'm actually going into a season of, I've been online training some clients, adaptive and non-adaptive. So that's also something that I have available to like request. So we can just get to know each other to see if it would be a good fit on my website. As far as competing, I have, the Open starts in a couple weeks. So the CrossFit Open, which is a qualifier to hopefully go back to the games. And so I might have another in-person competition coming up. Probably it wouldn't be in the US in the next few months, but that's kind of up in the air. But at the very least, I'm hoping to be at the games in August, and I will continue from there. So awesome. All of that on social media too. So if you're looking to see when the next competition is, I'll be active on there as well.
Well, awesome. And thank you for your time, Amy. And thank you for your inspiration and motivation. So I appreciate it.
I really appreciate your time, John. Thank you for having me on here.
Oh, hello. I'm just enjoying this nice fucking candle. Anyways, I'm John, the host of Spear Talk, and I want to talk to you about nice fucking candles. We are lucky to have Nice Fucking Candles as a sponsor of the podcast. And if you use code SpearTalk15, you get 15% off your first order, or use the affiliate link below to always get your candle needs through Nice Fucking Candles. Nice Fucking Candles are 100% soy wax. They have a 65-hour burn time, maybe more if you nurse the flame a little bit. Maybe, I don't know, I'm not an expert on flames or candles, but I will say these things burn a long fucking time. You ask me about the wick, it's a double wick for even burning, which is amazing. And they come in 3 incredible flavors. I'm not sure if you're going to be eating these candles, but if you do like them, the scents are eucalyptus and ginseng, tobacco and fireside, and seaside and driftwood. Once again, nice fucking candles. They are the candle company for Spirit Talk. And if you love candles and need a good scent to clear out your office, your room, your podcast room, your weight room, your whatever you're doing in a room that smells like crap, use this candle. It's amazing. Thank you. Check them out. Love nice fucking candles.